Get that trash out of my restaurant immediately." The manager's voice boomed across the dining hall, silencing the room. Everyone stared at the old, disheveled Asian man sitting quietly in the corner, clutching a glass of tap water. To the billionaire in the VIP booth, this man was a nuisance. To the manager, he was a stain on their reputation. But to Elena, the struggling waitress, he was just a human being in need of kindness. She didn't know that the beggar everyone was mocking was actually the most powerful man in the room. She didn't know that one sentence spoken in perfect Korean was about to destroy her enemies, save her life, and shock the entire world. This is the story of how kindness became the ultimate weapon. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the pavement, turning the city into a blur of grey and steel. But inside the Obsidian, everything was gold. The Obsidian wasn't just a restaurant, it was a fortress of ego. Located on the top floor of the Columbia Center, it was the kind of place where a bottle of Chateau Margaux cost more than a Honda Civic, and the napkins were made of Egyptian cotton thicker than most people's bedsheets. It was a place where tech moguls, hedge fund managers, and trust fund babies came to see and be seen. For Elena, it was a battlefield. Elena, Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling water. San Pellegrino, not the house water. Don't embarrass me again, Brad snapped, snapping his fingers inches from her face. Brad was the floor manager, a man who wore a tailored Armani suit that fit him a little too tightly, as if trying to contain an ego that had long since outgrown his body. He had slicked back hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He treated the staff like indentured servants, and the wealthy customers like gods. "Yes, Brad." "Right away," Elena said, keeping her head down. She grabbed the chilled green bottle and moved quickly across the marble floor. Her feet throbbed. She had been on a double shift for 3 days straight, fueled only by stale coffee and the desperate need to pay her mother's medical bills. Elena was 26, with tired eyes and hands roughened by years of hard labor. No one at the Obsidian knew her story. They didn't know that 3 years ago, she had been a top scholarship student at Yonsei University in Seoul, studying international business. They didn't know she spoke 3 languages fluently. To them, she was just the help, a body in a uniform. She poured the water for a couple who didn't even look at her. The woman was busy photographing her lobster risotto for Instagram, her Cartier love bracelets clinking against the table. The man was loudly discussing a merger, casually dropping names like Goldman Sachs and Elon. "Excuse me," the woman said, not looking up from her phone. "There's a smudge on this glass. Take it away." "I'm so sorry, Mom," Elena said softly, reaching for the glass. "Don't be sorry, just be competent," the woman sneered. Eleanor took the glass, her knuckles turning white. She walked back to the service station, her heart pounding a familiar rhythm of shame and exhaustion. She needed this job. The tips at the Obsidian were the only thing keeping the dialysis clinic from cutting off her mother's treatment. She swallowed her pride, just like she did every single night. "Focus, Elena," she whispered to herself. "Just 3 more hours. Then you can go home." But the night was about to take a turn that no one expected. Through the heavy oak double doors, the host stand was empty for a brief moment. The heavy rain outside had delayed the usual rush. The elevator chimed, and a man walked in. He wasn't the usual clientele. He was an elderly Asian man, perhaps in his late 60s. He was soaking wet. He wore a faded beige windbreaker that had seen better days, baggy grey trousers, and scuffed walking shoes. He held a dripping umbrella in one hand and a reusable grocery bag in the other. He looked like he had just walked 5 miles in the storm. He stood in the entryway, water pooling around his feet on the pristine marble, looking around the opulent dining room with a mixture of confusion and weariness. Brad, who was flirting with the hostess near the bar, spotted him immediately. His face twisted into a mask of disgust. He adjusted his silk tie and marched toward the old man like a bouncer at a nightclub. "Excuse me," Brad barked, his voice echoing slightly. "Sir, you cannot be in here." The old man blinked, looking at Brad. "Hello. Is this the restaurant?" His English was heavily accented, slow and deliberate. "This is the Obsidian," Brad said, puffing out his chest. "And it is a private establishment for reserved guests only. The delivery entrance is in the back, but we didn't order any takeout." "No delivery," the old man said, shaking his head. He shivered slightly from the cold. "I am hungry. I want to eat." Brad laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Eat? Here? Look, Pops, there's a McDonald's 3 blocks down. They have a $1 menu. This place has a dress code, and quite frankly, a bank account code. You are violating both." The commotion was starting to attract attention. A few diners turned their heads, whispering. "Please," the old man said, his voice soft. "It is raining very hard. I just want soup. Warm soup." I said, "Get out!" Brad stepped closer, invading the old man's personal space. "Before I call security and have you thrown out for trespassing, you're dripping dirty water on my Italian marble." Elena was watching from the service station. Her stomach twisted. She saw her own father in the old man's tired eyes. She saw the grandfather she never got to say goodbye to. Without thinking, she dropped her polishing cloth and hurried over. "Brad, wait," Elena said, stepping between the manager and the old man. Brad glared at her. "Elena, get back to your station. I'm handling this vagrant." "He's shivering, Brad," Elena whispered urgently. "Look at him. It's pouring outside. We have empty tables in the back corner near the kitchen. No one will see him. Let him just have a bowl of soup. I'll pay for it myself." Brad looked at Elena, then at the old man, and then back at the dining room. He saw a few VIPs watching. He realized that making a scene might be worse than hiding the problem. "Fine," Brad hissed, leaning into Elena's ear. "Put him in the absolute darkest corner. If he makes a sound or if he smells, you're fired. And I'm docking the cost of the meal from your tips plus a 20% inconvenience fee." "Thank you," Elena breathed. She turned to the old man and offered a warm, genuine smile. "Sir, please come with me. I'll get you a warm towel." The old man looked at Brad, his eyes dark and unreadable, before turning his gaze to Elena. His expression softened. "Thank you, miss," he said. As Elena led him through the restaurant, she felt the burning stares of the patrons. She walked with her head high, guiding him to table 42, a small, secluded booth near the kitchen doors. It was the worst seat in the house, usually reserved for solo diners who didn't tip, but tonight, it was a sanctuary. She didn't know it yet, but seating him at that table was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. Because the man sitting at the prime table, the VIP booth in the center of the room, was about to make everything much, much worse. The prime table, table 1, was occupied by Julian Thorne. Julian was the kind of man who thought the world existed solely to be his mirror. At 35, he was a venture capitalist known in the city as the Shark of Seattle. He was currently celebrating a pending acquisition of a Korean tech startup, a deal that was supposed to make him his next 100 million. He was loud, he was obnoxious, and he was currently 3 bottles deep into a vintage Dom Perignon. Sitting with him were 2 associates, yes men who laughed at every joke he made. Julian wore a Patek Philippe Nautilus watch that gleamed under the chandelier light, and his suit was bespoke from Savile Row. "So I told them," Julian bellowed, swirling his wine. "If you want to play in the big leagues, you play by American rules. I don't care about your culture or your seniority. I care about the bottom line." His associates guffawed. "You're a killer, Julian. A killer." Elena walked past their table, carrying a pot of jasmine tea for the old man in the corner. "Hey, sweetheart!" Julian snapped his fingers. Elena froze and turned. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, can I get you anything?" "Yeah, you can get me an explanation," Julian said, gesturing vaguely toward the back corner with his wine glass. "Why is there a homeless person eating in the same room as me? I thought this place was exclusive. I didn't know I was dining at a soup kitchen." One of his associates smirked. "Maybe he's the new entertainment." "I'm sorry, sir," Elena said politely. "He's just a customer getting out of the rain. He'll be very quiet." "It ruins the aesthetic," Julian grumbled. "I'm trying to close a massive deal tonight. The chairman of Hansong Group is supposed to be sending his proxy here any minute. If they see that thing over there, they'll think I have low standards." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Hansong Group. She knew that name. It was one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea, a chaebol family empire that owned everything from microchips to shipping lines. It was the Samsung of the story's world. If Julian was doing business with them, he was dealing with royalty. "I will make sure he doesn't disturb you, sir," Elena said, bowing her head slightly. She hurried to table 42. The old man was sitting quietly, staring at the menu with a confused expression. "Here is some hot tea, sir," Elena said, pouring the steaming liquid into a cup, "and a warm towel for your hands." The old man took the towel, his hands shaking slightly. "Thank you. You are very kind." He wiped his face and sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. "This menu, it is very French. I do not understand some words." "That's okay," Elena smiled. "I can recommend something. The lobster bisque is very rich, but the consommé is light and warming. Since you were out in the rain, maybe the consommé? And perhaps the sea bass? It's very tender." "Sea bass," the man repeated. "Fish. Good. I like fish. Simple. I'll put that in for you right away." "Wait," the man said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, cracked Samsung phone. He looked at the screen, frustrated. "I'm waiting for a call. Very important. But no signal?" "The walls are thick here," Elena apologized. "But if you connect to the Wi-Fi, it might help. Here, let me show you." She gently took the phone. It was an older model, set to Korean. Her eyes widened. She instinctively navigated the Hangul menus. Settings, Wi-Fi, connect. "There you go," she said, handing it back. The old man looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. He noticed how quickly she navigated the Korean interface. "You know this phone?" I've seen them before," she stammered, reverting to English. She didn't want to explain her past. "I'll get your soup." As she walked away, the old man watched her. A flicker of interest sparked in his dark eyes. He looked down at his phone. A message was waiting for him on Kakao Talk. "Secretary Kim, Chairman, the delegation has arrived at the hotel. Where are you? We are worried." The old man typed a slow reply. "I am observing. Do not come yet. I want to see who I am really doing business with." He hit send and looked over at Julian Thorne's table. Julian was currently yelling at a busboy for pouring the water too quickly. The old man's face hardened. He wasn't just a lost wanderer. He was Arthur Kang, the chairman of Hansong Group, and he was currently conducting the most important test of Julian Thorne's life. Julian was failing, but he didn't know it yet. 30 minutes passed. The restaurant was now full. The hum of conversation was loud, but Julian Thorne's voice cut through it like a chainsaw. "Where are they?" Julian shouted, checking his watch. "The Korean delegation is 20 minutes late. Disrespectful. This is why I hate working with these legacy families. No respect for American time." Brad, the manager, rushed over to Julian's table, sweating. "Mr. Thorne, can I get you another bottle? On the house? While you wait?" "Make it the Romanée Conti," Julian demanded. "And get that old bum out of my line of sight. He's slurping his soup like a pig." Arthur Kang was not slurping. He was eating quietly, but Julian needed a target for his frustration. Brad marched over to Elena, grabbing her arm roughly near the kitchen doors. "Get him out! Now!" "He's not finished, Brad," Elena protested, pulling her arm away. "He's paying. He has money." "I don't care if he has gold bars in his pocket. He's offending Mr. Thorne. Mr. Thorne spends $50,000 a year here. That old man bought a $30 soup. Do the math, Elena. Drop the check and tell him the table is reserved for a 9 p.m. booking." "That's a lie," Elena said, her eyes flashing. "It's an order," Brad hissed. Elena took a deep breath. She grabbed the bill folder. She walked over to the old man, her heart heavy. "Sir," she said softly. Arthur Kang looked up. He had barely touched his sea base. He was looking at Julian's table with a mix of sadness and steel. "Yes. I'm so sorry, but my manager says we need this table. For a reservation." Elena felt like throwing up. She hated lying. Arthur looked at the empty tables around them. He looked at Elena's pained expression. He understood immediately. "I see," Arthur said. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply reached for his wallet, a Velcro wallet that looked like it belonged to a teenager. Julian Thorne saw the wallet from across the room and roared with laughter. "Look at that! A Velcro wallet! My God, did he rob a kid on the way in here? Hey, Grandpa, do you need a loan?" The entire restaurant went silent. The cruelty was palpable. Arthur froze. His hand stilled on the wallet. He slowly turned his head to look directly at Julian. "Manners," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Money buys many things. It does not buy class." Julian stood up, his face turning red. The challenge had been issued. "Excuse me? Did the street trash just speak to me?" Brad panicked. He rushed between them. "Mr. Thorne, please sit down. I'm handling it." He turned to Arthur, his face furious. Get out now. You are banned." Elena stepped in front of Arthur, shielding him. "He is a customer. You can't just kick him out for speaking the truth." "You're fired!" Brad screamed, his spit flying. "Get your things and get out, Elena. Both of you, out." And then it happened. Arthur's phone rang, a loud, generic ringtone. Arthur ignored Brad. He ignored Julian. He picked up the phone. He spoke clearly, not in broken English, but in rapid, authoritative Korean. "Yoboseo, Secretary Kim. Yes. I am at the restaurant. The deal is off. Cancel the funding. Tell the board I have seen enough." The room was silent, save for the Korean words flowing from his mouth. Most people didn't understand. But Julian Thorne froze. He recognized the tone. "And Elena?" Elena turned to the old man, and without thinking, she spoke, in perfect, formal, high honorific Korean. "Sir, are you Chairman Kang?" Arthur stopped. He looked at the waitress who had shown him the only kindness in the room. He lowered the phone. "Yes, child," he replied in Korean, his eyes warm. "I am." He stood up. The slouch was gone. The old man in the windbreaker seemed to grow 3 inches taller. The aura of power that suddenly radiated from him was terrifying. He looked at Brad. He looked at Julian. "Now," Arthur said, in perfect, unaccented English. "I believe I heard someone say they wanted to buy this restaurant." The silence that descended upon the obsidian was heavier than the marble tables. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the suffocating vacuum that occurs right before a bomb detonates. Julian Thorne, the shark of Seattle, stood frozen. His mouth was slightly open, his glass of Dom Perignon halfway to his lips. He looked at the old man in the baggy windbreaker, desperately trying to reconcile the image of a street vagrant with the legendary figure of Arthur Kang. "Chairman." "Kang?" Julian stammered, his voice losing all its booming bravado. "No, that's impossible. My assistant said you were at the Four Seasons. They said you were wearing a suit. Arthur Kang slowly unzipped his windbreaker. Underneath, he wore a simple white t-shirt, but around his neck hung a small jade pendant, carved in the shape of a dragon, the insignia of the Han Seong dynasty. It was a piece of jewelry worth more than the entire building they were standing in. "I was at the Four Seasons," Arthur said, his voice calm but cutting like a razor. "But I dislike hotels. They are sterile. I wanted to see the city. I wanted to see the man I was about to entrust with $500 million of my family's money. I wanted to see how he treats those he considers beneath him." Arthur took a step forward. Brad, the manager, literally stumbled backward, knocking over a stand of menus. "And what did I see?" Arthur continued, his eyes locking onto Julian. "I saw a man who measures worth by the price of a wine bottle. I saw a bully, a shark. No, sharks are majestic. You are just a parasite in a tuxedo." Julian's face turned a violent shade of purple. Panic was setting in. He knew the deal wasn't signed yet. It was a handshake agreement, pending this dinner. "Chairman, please, you have to understand. We get riffraff in here all the time. I was just trying to protect the atmosphere for our meeting. I did this for you." "For me?" Arthur laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You insulted a guest. You mocked poverty. And you tried to fire the only person in this room who has a human soul." Arthur turned to Brad. The manager was shaking, sweat beading on his forehead. "You," Arthur said. "You fired this young woman?" It was a heat-of-the-moment thing, sir. I didn't know. If I had known who you were," Brad babbled. "If you had known who I was, you would have kissed my feet," Arthur interrupted. "That is the problem. Integrity is how you treat people who can do nothing for you. And you failed." Suddenly, the elevator doors at the front of the restaurant dinged. But this time, it wasn't a diner. 4 men in sharp, dark suits walked in. They moved with military precision. They wore earpieces. They scanned the room and immediately spotted Arthur. They didn't run, but they walked with a terrifying speed. "Chairman," the lead security officer said, bowing deeply, 90 degrees at the waist. "We lost your signal. We were terrified." "I am fine, Chief Choi," Arthur said in Korean, waving them off casually. "I was just having dinner with my new friend." He gestured to Elena. The entire restaurant was watching now. Phones were out. People were recording. This was the downfall of Julian Thorne, broadcast live to social media. Julian realized he was losing control of the narrative. He decided to switch tactics. He needed to be the alpha. "Look, Arthur," Julian said, trying to regain his swagger, though his voice cracked. "Let's cut the dramatics. You're a businessman. I'm a businessman. So I was rude. Who cares? The numbers on the acquisition are solid. You're going to throw away a $500 million profit because I yelled at a waitress and a guy in a windbreaker. That's bad business." Arthur looked at Julian with genuine pity. "You think this is about feelings?" Arthur asked. "No, Mr. Thorne. This is about risk. A man who lacks discipline in his personal conduct will lack discipline in his finances. A man who is cruel to the weak will eventually try to cheat the strong. I am not cancelling the deal because I am offended. I am cancelling it because you are a bad investment." Julian slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You can't do that. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. My stock price is already factoring this in. If you pull out, I'm ruined." "Then I suggest you start saving your pennies," Arthur said coldly. "Perhaps there is a McDonald's 3 blocks down? I hear they have a $1 menu." The echo of Julian's own insult hit him like a physical blow. Arthur turned his back on the billionaire. He looked at Elena, who was standing quietly by the service station, still clutching the billfolder. Her hands were trembling. "Miss," Arthur said gently. Elena looked up. "Yes, Chairman?" "You spoke Korean to me," he said. Not just tourist Korean. You used the Yondetmal, the high honorifics. And your accent, it is from Seoul, specifically the Gangnam district. But you are not Korean. Elena shook her head. No, sir. I am American. Then how? Arthur asked, tilting his head. How does a waitress in Seattle speak the language of my court better than my own executives? Elena swallowed hard. She looked at Brad, who was visibly hyperventilating near the host stand. She looked at Julian, who was frantically typing on his phone, likely calling his lawyers. It's a long story, sir, she said. I have time, Arthur said. He gestured to table 42, the dark corner table. Please, sit with me. I am still hungry, and I believe you recommended the sea bass. I can't sit, sir. I'm working. And I'm fired, Elena whispered. Arthur signaled to his head of security. The large man in the suit stepped toward Brad. Excuse me. The security chief grunted at Brad. The chairman wishes for this employee to be reinstated immediately, and for her to join him for dinner. Is there a problem? Brad squeaked. No problem. She's rehired. Triple pay. Take a break, Elena. Take the whole night. Arthur smiled at Elena. See, problem solved. Please, sit. I want to know who you really are. Elena sat. It felt surreal. 10 minutes ago, she was a ghost, invisible to the world. Now, she was sitting across from one of the most powerful men in Asia, while 4 bodyguards formed a protective perimeter around their table. A terrified busboy brought a fresh bowl of sea bass consommé, his hands shaking so much the soup nearly spilled. Arthur took a sip and sighed contentedly. Good, he said. Now, tell me, who taught you? Eleanor took a deep breath. She had kept this part of her life hidden for so long, burying it under the weight of medical bills and poverty. My father, Eleanor began, her voice steadying. He was a diplomat. He was stationed in Seoul for 12 years. I grew up there. I went to international school, but I loved the culture, so I insisted on attending a local high school. Arthur's eyebrows raised. That is unusual. The local schools are very rigorous. They are, Elena smiled sadly. I studied hard. I got a full scholarship to Yonsei University, International Business and Linguistics. Arthur put his spoon down. Yonsei? You were a Sky University student? Top of my class, Elena said, a flicker of pride returning to her eyes. I was going to intern at a major tech firm. I had a future. I was going to be a bridge between American and Korean markets. I wanted to do what you do. Build things. Connect people. And then? Arthur asked softly. And then my father died, Elena said, looking down at her hands. A heart attack. He didn't manage his money well. He left us with debt. Massive debt. And then my mother, she got sick. Kidney failure. The American healthcare system. It eats money, sir. It eats everything. She looked up, her eyes wet but clear. I dropped out. I came back to Seattle to take care of her. I sold the house, I sold the car. I work 3 jobs. This one pays the best because of the tips. Usually. Arthur listened in silence. He studied her face. He saw the intelligence behind the fatigue. He saw the resilience that could not be taught in a classroom. You speak 3 languages? Arthur asked. English, Korean, and Mandarin, Elena answered. And I'm learning Spanish because the kitchen staff here speaks it, and I wanted to be respectful to them. Arthur nodded slowly. He took a sip of water. You know, Arthur said, my company, Han Seong, we are looking for a liaison director for our North American operations. We need someone who understands the culture of the West, but respects the traditions of the East. We have interviewed 50 candidates, MBAs from Harvard, PhDs from Oxford. He leaned in. They were all like Mr. Thorne over there, Arthur whispered. Smart, but hollow. They knew the numbers, but they didn't know people. They wouldn't have noticed an old man shivering in the rain. And if they did, They wouldn't have offered him a warm towel. They would have called security. Elena's heart began to pound against her ribs. She didn't dare hope. "Sir?" "Elena," Arthur said formally, "how much is your mother's medical debt?" It's a lot, sir. Over $200,000. "Pocket change." Arthur waved his hand dismissively. "And how much does this man, Brad, pay you?" $12 an hour plus tips," Arthur scoffed. "Criminal. Absolutely criminal." He pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Secretary Kim?" "Yes, Chairman." The voice on the phone answered instantly. "Draft a contract. Standard executive package. Level 4. Full benefits. Immediate vesting. And include a signing bonus." "How much for the bonus, Chairman?" Arthur looked at Elena. He looked at her worn-out shoes. He looked at the determination in her jaw. $250,000. Net. After taxes. Elena gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. "Sir, I can't." "Hush," Arthur commanded gently. "I am not giving you charity. I am making an investment. I told Mr. Thorne I pulled out because he was a bad investment. You, Elena, you are an undervalued asset. I am acquiring you before the market realizes what you are worth." At the center table, Julian Thorne had realized something was happening. He saw the contract talk. He saw the shift in atmosphere. He realized he wasn't just losing money, he was losing face. And for a narcissist like Julian, that was unacceptable. He stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol. He adjusted his tie and walked toward table 42, pushing past the security guard who tried to stop him. "You've got to be kidding me," Julian sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You're hiring her, the waitress. You're cancelling a merger with Thorne Capital to hire a girl who wipes tables for a living?" Julian laughed, looking around the room for support, but the room was silent. "This is a joke, right?" Julian continued, leaning over the table. "She's a nobody, Kang. She's trash. She probably slept with the manager just to get this shift. You're going to let a little thing like her dictate a billion-dollar deal?" The air in the restaurant turned freezing cold. Arthur Kang slowly placed his napkin on the table. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at Elena. "Elena," Arthur said softly. "Translate for me, please." "Sir?" Elena asked, confused. "I'm going to speak to Mr. Thorne in Korean. I want you to translate exactly what I say. Do not soften it. Do not make it polite. Translate it word for word." Elena nodded, her eyes hardening. She stood up. She faced Julian Thorne. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't a waitress cowering before a rude customer. She was the voice of the chairman. Arthur spoke. His voice was low, guttural, and terrifying. "Neonun, ne nuna peso, gemando, mothan, nomida." Elena looked at Julian, her voice steady and loud. "The chairman says, 'In my eyes, you are a creature lower than a dog.'" Julian recoiled as if slapped. "Excuse me," Arthur continued, his voice rising in intensity. "Neaga, neowe, moden, geosul, pake, hal, geosida." Elena translated, her voice ringing through the hall. "He says, 'I will destroy everything you have.'" Arthur stood up, his eyes blazing fire. He delivered the final blow. "Nay, don yoro. Neowi, hesarul, saseo, I, yojaege, jul, gyosada." Elena paused. She looked at Arthur, shocked. Arthur nodded. Elena turned to Julian, a small, vindictive smile touching her lips. "He says, 'I am going to use my money to buy your company, and I am going to give it to her.'" Julian Thorne's laughter was a brittle, desperate thing. It echoed off the high ceilings of the obsidian, sounding more like a cough than amusement. "Buy my company?" Julian sputtered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Do you have any idea how the market works, old man? Thorne Capital is valued at $300 million. You can't just walk into a restaurant in a windbreaker and buy a venture capital firm because you're mad at me. There are regulations, there are boards, there are laws." Arthur Kang sat back down. He picked up his chopsticks and took a small piece of the sea bass. He chewed slowly, savouring the flavour, completely ignoring the man screaming at him. "Elena," Arthur said calmly, not looking up, "is the Wi-Fi still connected?" "Yes, Chairman," Elena replied, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "Good. Hand me my tablet. It is in the grocery bag." Elena reached into the reusable bag that Julian had mocked earlier. Inside, nestled between a bag of oranges and a box of tea, was a customized, ultra-secure tablet, a device that controlled assets worth more than the GDP of a small country. Arthur powered it on. He tapped the screen 3 times. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said, his eyes glued to the screen, "you are correct. I cannot buy your company in 5 minutes. However, I own 40% of the Asian semiconductor supply chain that your portfolio companies rely on. I also happen to be the largest limited partner in the hedge fund that backs your loans." Arthur tapped the screen again. "I am currently sending a priority message to the Global Risk Committee of BlackRock and Vanguard. I am informing them that Hansong Group will immediately cease all cooperation with any entity associated with Julian Thorne due to severe ethical violations and instability." Julian's face went white. He knew what that meant. It wasn't a takeover. It was a siege. "You wouldn't," Julian whispered. "I just did," Arthur said, turning the tablet around to show the message sent screen. "Now watch your phone." For 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The restaurant was dead silent. Even the kitchen staff had come out to watch. Then, Julian's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it began to vibrate continuously, a swarm of angry notifications. Julian looked at the screen. Text from CFO. "Julian, what did you do? The Asian markets just flagged our debt." Text from board member. "Why is Hansong pulling the chip supply? Stock is plummeting in after-hours trading." Call from the board. Julian's hands shook so violently he dropped the phone. It cracked on the marble floor, the same floor he was so worried about dirtying earlier. Arthur looked at Elena. "Do you know what leverage is, Elena?" "It's using borrowed capital to increase the potential return of an investment," she recited from her university days. "In school, yes," Arthur smiled. "In life, leverage is knowing what the other man needs more than air. Mr. Thorne needs validation. He needs to feel big. So when you take away his money, he becomes very, very small." Arthur turned to the head of security. "Chief Choi, escort Mr. Thorne out. He is disturbing my dinner." "With pleasure, sir." 2 massive bodyguards stepped forward. Julian, the shark of Seattle, the man who owned the room, looked around for help. Brad was hiding in the kitchen. His friends at the table were staring at their plates, pretending they didn't know him. "You can't do this!" Julian screamed as the guards grabbed him by the arms. "I am Julian Thorne. I am a VIP." "Not anymore," Elena said softly. As they dragged him toward the elevator, kicking and screaming like a toddler, Julian made eye contact with Elena one last time. In his eyes, she saw pure terror. He wasn't scared of being poor. He was scared of being irrelevant. When the elevator doors shut, the entire restaurant erupted. Not in applause, but in a collective exhale. The tension broke. Brad, the manager, slowly crept out of the kitchen. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He approached table 42, wringing his hands. "Chairman! Elena!" Brad stammered. I just want to say, misunderstandings happen, and I am so happy we could resolve this." Arthur didn't even look at him. He looked at Elena. "This is your employee, Elena. How do you wish to handle him?" Elena looked at Brad. She remembered the insults. She remembered him docking her tips. She remembered him making her work while sick. She held the power to fire him, to destroy him, just like Arthur destroyed Julian. But Elena looked at the jade pendant around Arthur's neck. Dignity. "Brad," Elena said, her voice firm. "I resign." Brad blinked. "What?" "I resign," she repeated, "and I suggest you change the way you treat people. Not because they might be billionaires in disguise, but because they are people. If you don't, this restaurant will be empty in a month." She took off her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table. "Chairman," she said, turning to Arthur, "I am ready to go." Arthur smiled, a genuine, grandfatherly smile. "Let's go, Director Elena. We have a lot of work to do. And please, call me Arthur." 6 months later. The skyline of Seoul didn't just glow, it pulsed. From the 50th floor of the Hanseong Group global headquarters, the city looked like a circuit board of gold and neon, a sprawling testament to human ambition. The Han River cut through the metropolis like a ribbon of black silk, reflecting the lights of 1,000 dreams. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass window, watching the traffic crawl across the Mapo Bridge. She took a sip of barley tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. It was a stark contrast to the bone-chilling rain of Seattle that used to soak into her cheap sneakers just half a year ago. She turned back to her office. It was a space designed to intimidate. The furniture was Italian leather. The desk was a slab of reclaimed mahogany, large enough to land a helicopter on, and the art on the walls was original, and insured for millions. Elena placed her cup down on a coaster. She adjusted the cuff of her cream-colored blazer. She wasn't the girl in the stained apron anymore. She was Director Elena Vance, head of North American Strategic Partnerships. She managed a portfolio of $4 billion. She had a staff of 30 people who jumped when she cleared her throat. But on the corner of that massive mahogany desk, encased in a small crystal block, was a faded, crinkled piece of paper. It was an old receipt from the Obsidian. It was the bill for a bowl of sea bass consommé and a bottle of mineral water. It was the only thing she had kept from her old life. It was her anchor. The intercom on her desk buzzed, a soft, respectful chime. "Director Vance?" The voice of her executive assistant, Minji, came through the speaker. "Yes, Minji," Elena replied, her voice steady and commanding. "The delegation from the New York Stock Exchange is scheduled for the conference call in 20 minutes. I have the files ready." However, Minji hesitated. "There is a situation in the lobby." Elena frowned slightly. "What kind of situation? Is it the press?" "No, ma'am. It is a man. He does not have an appointment. Security tried to turn him away, but he insists he knows you. He says he traveled here from America specifically to see you. He says his name is Julian." The name hung in the air-conditioned silence of the office. Julian. Elena felt a phantom chill. For a split second, she was back in the restaurant, hearing the snap of his fingers, feeling the heat of his humiliation, the way he looked at her as if she were dirt on his shoe. She walked over to her desk and sat down. She looked at the crystal-encased receipt. "Send him up," Elena said. "Director, are you sure?" Minji asked. He does not look like our usual guests. Security is concerned." "It's fine, Minji. Have Security Chief Choi escort him. Send him in." 10 minutes of heavy silence passed. Elena didn't work. She sat perfectly still, her hands clasped on the desk, waiting. The double doors of her office opened. Julian Thorne walked in. If Eleanor hadn't been expecting him, she might not have recognized him. The shark of Seattle had been declawed. The man who used to wear $5,000 bespoke suits was now wearing a jacket that was clearly off the rack, the fabric slightly shiny and ill-fitting at the shoulders. He had lost weight, his face gaunt and pale. The arrogant gleam in his eyes, that predatory shine that used to terrify waitresses and junior analysts alike, was gone. It was replaced by a hollow, nervous exhaustion. He stopped just inside the door, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of Elena's office. He looked at the view of Seoul, then at the security guards standing like statues by the door, and finally at Elena. "Elena," he croaked. He cleared his throat and tried to straighten his posture, a reflex from a life he no longer lived. "I mean, Director Vance." Eleanor didn't stand up. She didn't smile. She simply gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Mr. Thorne," she said coolly, "you've come a long way. Please, sit." Julian walked across the plush carpet. He sat on the edge of the chair, his hands gripping his knees. He looked at the nameplate on her desk, then up at her face. He seemed to be searching for a trace of the submissive servant girl he remembered, but he found only a titan of industry. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Elena asked, leaning back. "I assume you aren't here to order the Pinot Noir." Julian winced. The reference hit its mark. I wanted to apologize," Julian began, his voice shaky. "For that night. I was drunk. I was under pressure. It wasn't who I am." "We are what we do, Mr. Thorne," Elena cut him off. "And what you did was treat a human being like garbage because you thought no one important was watching. But someone was watching. And now here we are." Julian swallowed hard. He looked down at his scuffed shoes. "I lost everything, Elena. Everything. Arthur. Chairman Kang. He didn't just pull the funding. He blacklisted me. The board fired me the next morning. The SEC opened an investigation into my previous trades. My wife left me. My friends won't return my calls. I'm toxic. I can't even get a job as a junior associate." He looked up, his eyes wet with desperation. "I saw the press release," he continued, the words tumbling out now. "Hansong is expanding its North American charitable division. You're hiring analysts and program managers. I know the Seattle market, Elena. I know the players. I have an MBA from Wharton. I ran a $300 million fund. I can help you." It was a pathetic, visceral sight. The man who once claimed to own the city was now begging for scraps from the table of the woman he had tried to get fired. Elena stood up slowly. She walked around the massive desk, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She circled him like a predator, inspecting wounded prey. "You have an MBA," Elena said thoughtfully. "You understand leverage. You understand ROI. You understand market caps." "Yes," Julian nodded eagerly. "Yes, I do. I can run the numbers better than anyone." "That's your problem, Julian," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think business is about numbers. You think power is about the zeros in a bank account." She stopped in front of him and leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. "When I was a waitress," Elena said, "I learned more about economics in one shift than you learned in 2 years at business school. I learned that if you treat the dishwasher with respect, he'll prioritize your plates when you're in the weeds. I learned that if you give a free cookie to a crying child, the parents will tip you 20% more. I learned that the economy isn't money. It's people. It's relationships. It's dignity." She looked him dead in the eye. "You aren't qualified to work for Hansong, Julian. Not because you're bad at math, but because you're bad at people. You are a liability. If I put you in a room with our partners, you would insult the wrong person within a week, and I would spend a month cleaning up your mess." Julian slumped, the last bit of hope drained from his face. He looked like he was about to cry. "I have nowhere else to go, Elena. I'm going to lose my apartment next month. I'm begging you." Elena watched him for a long moment. She saw the absolute defeat in his posture. She remembered the rage she felt 6 months ago, the desire to see him crushed. She had wanted him to suffer. But as she looked at him now, a broken man in a cheap suit, she didn't feel satisfaction. She felt pity, and she remembered the lesson Arthur Kang had taught her. True power isn't about destruction. It's about investment. I won't hire you as an analyst, Elena said. Julian began to stand up, his shoulders shaking. Okay, I understand. I'll leave. Sit down, Elena commanded. Julian froze and sat back down. Elena reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a plain white business card. She placed it on the desk and slid it across the mahogany surface toward him. This is the contact for the Han Seong Hope Initiative in Seattle, Elena said. We are opening a new community center in the downtown district. It's a soup kitchen and job training center for the homeless and at-risk youth. Julian stared at the card. Soup kitchen? We need a floor manager, Elena said. Someone to organize the inventory, manage the volunteer shifts, and ensure the food is distributed efficiently. It pays $45,000 a year. It comes with health insurance. Julian looked up, his face twisted in confusion. You want me, Julian Thorne, to run a soup kitchen? You want me to serve homeless people? Yes, Elena said, her voice hard as steel. I want you to serve the very people you mocked. I want you to look them in the eye. I want you to learn their names. I want you to understand that the man in the dirty windbreaker might be a father, or a veteran, or a genius who just had a bad run of luck. She leaned in closer. Here is the deal, Julian. You take this job. You work it for 6 months. You wear the apron. You clean the tables. You don't complain. You don't check your phone. You treat every single person who walks through those doors like they are the chairman of Hansong Group. Elena's eyes bored into his. If you can do that, if you can prove to me that you have learned humility, then call me in 6 months, and I will interview you for the senior analyst position. But if you quit, or if I hear one report of you being rude to a guest, you are done, forever. Julian looked at the card. It was a humiliating offer. It was a demotion so severe it was almost a joke. But as he looked at the card, he realized it wasn't a punishment. It was a lifeline. It was an education he had missed. He reached out, his hand trembling, and picked up the card. He held it like it was made of fragile glass. I'll take it, Julian whispered. Good, Elena said. The shift starts at 5 a.m. Don't be late. We serve breakfast. Julian stood up. He looked at Elena, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in his gaze. There was only awe. Thank you, Director, he said softly. Goodbye, Mr. Thorne. He turned and walked out of the office. He walked differently now. The heavy burden of his ego had been lifted, replaced by the weight of a new challenge. He had a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, he was heading in the right direction. Elena let out a long breath she didn't know she was holding. She walked back to the window. The door to the private elevator chimed, and a moment later, Arthur Kang walked in. He was wearing a casual sweater and holding a tablet, looking every bit the kindly grandfather, rather than the ruthless corporate raider. I passed Mr. Thorne in the hallway, Arthur said, joining her at the window. He looked contemplative. He has a lot to think about, Elena said. Did you give him the job? Arthur asked. I gave him the apron, Elena corrected. I sent him to the Seattle Center. Arthur chuckled, a low, rumbling sound of approval. The School of Hard Knocks. An excellent curriculum. Better than Wharton. He looked at Eleanor with pride. You could have destroyed him, you know, Arthur said quietly. You could have laughed him out of the building. No one would have blamed you. I know, Elena replied, watching the city lights flicker. But you taught me that a good investor doesn't throw away a distressed asset if it still has value. Julian is broken, but he's smart. If he can learn empathy, he'll be unstoppable. I'm just restructuring the asset. Arthur smiled and patted her on the shoulder. You are wise beyond your years, Elena. You didn't just win the war. You won the peace. That is the mark of a true leader." Elena smiled back. She looked at her reflection in the glass, the reflection of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of steel. She thought of the rain in Seattle, the ache in her feet, and the despair that used to consume her. And then she looked at the city of Seoul, a city of infinite possibility. "I'm just getting started, Arthur," she said. Arthur raised his imaginary glass. "To the future, Director." "To the future," Elena echoed. She turned away from the window, ready for the next meeting, ready for the next challenge, ready to rule. The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived. What a roller coaster. Elena proved that true power isn't about the suit you wear or the money in your bank account. It's about the content of your character. Julian learned the hard way that when you look down on people, you're usually exposing your own weakness, while Elena showed us that kindness is an investment that always pays the highest dividends. If you enjoyed this story of karma, redemption, and the ultimate clapback, please smash that like button. It helps us create more dramatic stories just for you. Did you think Elena was too nice to Julian at the end, or did he deserve a harder punishment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind because you never know who you're really talking to.